Hi, my name is Chesney Eberly, and my report was over the book Why Men Don't Have a Clue and Women Always Need More Shoes by Barbara and Alan Peace. This book presents common relationship problems caused by gender differences and provides solutions to these problems by explaining why the differences occur and how we can use these differences to the opposite sex's advantage. The authors take an extreme evolutionary perspective to gender differences. Almost every gender problem portrayed in this book is accounted for by the way that humans evolved. They explore in depth the fact that men evolved from hunters. Because they hunted, it was necessary for men to be competitive, aggressive, and assertive. Women, on the other hand, were expected to stay and tend to the cave and rear the young. They were to find comfort in the time spent with other wives, causing them to evolve to be compassionate, social, and dependent on men and friends. This book takes a look at common issues that heterosexual relationships have, including many common questions that arise about the opposite sex. We are going to take a look at some of the most prominent questions and explain how the book compares to research on those questions. The first question is a common stereotype and a common question that men have about women. Why do they talk so much? The book accounts for evolution being a big part of this. Because women stayed at home in the cave while the men hunted, they created many relationships with those that were around them, the other wives. They solved problems together, talked their problems out, and found things to talk about all day to pass the time. Women use talking as a bonding technique and find comfort in being able to talk to people about their problems and daily activities. Meyer and fellow researchers indicate that women are taught to talk this much because of their environment. They stated that we raise girls to talk about their issues and feelings rather than act on them. We teach them to desire social activity and to bond with others by sharing feelings and thoughts. The media also portrays girls in this manner, telling them that it is normal for girls to divulge too much information and the need to be constantly talking to create lasting bonds and understanding. The next question we're going to talk about is why do women nag so often? The book indicates that this is a huge source of conflict in relationships. There have even been cases of husbands murdering their wives for the simple fact that they couldn't handle their wives nagging anymore. Watch out, ladies. The book says that women nag for several reasons. Women are known for being proficient at multitasking. They can be talking on the phone, putting on makeup, and driving a car all at the same time. Therefore, when they are talking about everything around the house that needs to get done, men can't follow what their wives are saying and miss the point of what they are supposed to do. Because of this, women have to repeat over and over what they want or need, causing the nagging. I think this portrays men as simple-minded, which I don't think is true at all. This is too simplistic of an approach for me. The authors also say that women nag as a source of attention. Housewives oftentimes feel lonely and underappreciated, so they nag in order for husbands and children to realize how much they really do around the house and to feel as if they are being heard so they aren't feeling as lonely. This is a question I always have and one of my biggest pet peeves about driving with men in cars. Why can't men ask for directions? The book states that men are evolutionarily problem solvers. When they went to hunt, they needed to be able to strategize independently and to obtain food. To ask another for help with the situation would show them that the man is inadequate to do his job and ultimately will end up hurting the man's pride. The book also says that men may be born with a higher concentration of iron in their body, making them naturally designed to know where true north is, which guides them in their search for direction. Research agrees with the book in that men are better at directions than women. In a study where men and women had to respond to questions based on geography, men performed better in every situation. They couldn't attribute this difference to travel history, desire to travel, or to incidental exposure to the locations presented, indicating that there is likely some biological influences making men superior in directional tasks. Why are men so addicted to sports? Since men are natural-born hunters, sports enable them to bring out their inner competitiveness and allow them to be part of a hunting pack or sports team. Recent research indicates that this is true, and sports allow the men to bring out their masculinity in these subjects. Sports allow men to show physical aggression, again coming from the evolution from hunters. I get asked this question constantly by my boyfriend. Why do women cry? And why do they cry so much? The authors of this book state that women use their tears as a stress reliever because they release endorphins that ultimately make them feel better after crying. They also release tears as an emotional signal, which causes the release of oxytocin, making women desire contact from another person. However, the book also says that women use tears as manipulation, which to me is very stereotypical, but it also probably is true in some cases. Men don't deal well with emotion and often hide their negative emotions, so when women openly cry, they feel uncomfortable and give into what the women want just to get them to stop. I think that this makes women look too manipulative, but sadly I can think of many instances where this is used and proves to be true. Well, I thought that this book was very great and helpful in understanding some gender differences. I also found it to have some drawbacks and limitations. First, I thought that men were portrayed as much too simple. The book made many statements that men just didn't understand what women were talking about, and that they could almost never pick up on subtle cues. While this may be true in some cases, I'd like to see more actual literature and research to back the claims that they made up. I also thought that the strong evolutionary standpoint the authors took was a major drawback. For many of the gender differences, they didn't count for the environment being any sort of factor, and from what we learned in this class, we have learned that environment is a huge factor. Biology is big as well, but environment should be taken into consideration because it is a big influence. I thought that this made their research seem invalid and unreliable at times. The book also focused on too many gender differences. While we all know that men and women are hugely different, it is also important to remember how we are the same and how we need to treat people as equal. The book provided dialogue to use in conflicts, but made the women talk down to the men, treating them way different than they should. I think that conflict needs to be resolved, treating each person as equal, and that no one should be seen as inferior or not understanding what the other one is saying. I also think that this book sometimes made problem solving much too difficult. They had specific dialogues to use, but it made it sound forced, and it seemed like you had to practice that exact script to get good results. However, I think that having good and healthy communication between spouses and significant others can solve many of the problems and questions presented in this book. Thank you for listening.